Okay. Everybody good? Okay. Just going to assume yes. Okay. So even outside of any training that you've gotten here, I'm sure all of you have heard of HIPAA. Over the last year and a half with COVID, there's been a lot of confusion around what HIPAA is, what HIPAA is not, what's actually covered by HIPAA, how it's actually applied. And SourcePoint, over the COVID year, over 2020, we did update our HIPAA policies and procedures. So we thought it would be a good time to kind of retrain all of you on this topic that does apply to SourcePoint. So real quick, what is HIPAA? HIPAA stands for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. It was first passed in 1996. It's had a lot of revisions since then. Most recent was the 2009 high-tech version of the law that added a lot of things related to business associates, as well as using technology to store your client information. The purpose of HIPAA is to protect sensitive health information from being disclosed without the person's knowledge or the person's consent. The only groups that are bound to follow HIPAA law are those that are determined to be what's called a covered entity or a covered entity's business associates. And what they're bound to protect is the information of their patients, or in SourcePoint's case, our clients. And SourcePoint is obviously considered a covered entity. So why is SourcePoint a covered entity? I'm sure most of you are used to signing, HIPAA releases when you go to the doctor, when you go to really any medical facility, but as I'm sure most of you know, we aren't directly medical. So why is SourcePoint a covered entity? And in-home care services is really the biggest reason that SourcePoint is considered a covered entity. In-home care services collects, manages, and sends out health information on the clients that we enroll through that program for services. So that's really the number one reason that SourcePoint has to follow this law. Because of this, SourcePoint partners who may also have access to this information are then also required to follow the law. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it does extend out beyond SourcePoint for those that partner with us in certain things. So outside of having their information protected, let's back up. So what is actually protected? Because this can also get confusing for folks. Protected health information is anything that is created, maintained, or communicated by a covered entity about a client. So most information is considered PHI, or protected health information. It is not strictly the actual health information of the person. So things included in this are a client's name, a client's date of birth, a client's address, a client's email address, insurance numbers, Medicare numbers, their driver's license number, if SourcePoint's the one collecting it. And then of course, what I'm sure you're all familiar with, their actual health information. So any health conditions they have had, past or present, the services that they're getting through in-home care, and then any past payment for healthcare. So the key to this is if the covered entity is collecting it about a client, more than likely it's protected under this rule. So now we're going to talk quickly about what rights do clients have beyond just having their information protected. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but we had a question by Julie.
Okay.
And she was asking if this was referring, because we're using the word clients, to clients only or members and volunteers.
So it would not directly apply to members and volunteers. It does get tricky for us because of the way that our agency is structured. So we try to be as private as we can with our member information, and we use general confidentiality rules as far as personal identifiable information. But members and volunteers do not fall under the HIPAA protections that are much more stringent. I can't see anybody, so does that make sense?
Thank you.
Hey, Amelia.
Yeah.
While we're talking about this, let me ask you to clarify a little further. So we do have folks that cross those barriers, and we've have members who may be clients.
Mhm.
So I think that's often our challenge with this agency in using information or sharing information or anything, is that just because a person is listed in ActiveNet doesn't necessarily mean they're not a client in FamCare. And I just wanted to point that out and see if you agreed.
Yeah, so Kim kind of hit the biggest struggle that SourcePoint has on the head, and that has to do with folks that we serve in multiple capacities. So if someone is an in-home care client, that is considered protected information. So they may or may not want people to know they're an in-home care client. So it gets tricky when, they have a care consultant and maybe the care consultant sees them over on the other side of our building. That care consultant might have to then basically ignore that person unless that person chooses to acknowledge the care consultant. Membership, being an enrichment or being a SourcePoint member through our community programs is not protected under HIPAA, but being an in-home care client is. So if someone is both, we have to be really, really careful about what information we're sharing, where, and how we gathered that information. And I know that that's super confusing. And one of the things I'm going to say on my very last slide is if you're not sure, just ask, just talk to me about it. I'm happy to talk through the gray situations to try and make the best choice that we can given on whatever the circumstance happens to be, because it is a real challenge for our agency just because of the way that we're structured and the way we can serve folks in the community in so many different ways. Other questions?
I have one more follow-up, Amelia, just because I like to hit all the big three. So nutrition clients are considered in-home care clients. So would you clarify that?
Yeah, so 100%. Yeah, nutrition clients, anything that we get through that program also is going to be covered under HIPAA. That's going to include certain things around congregate dining as well, because of the way that we have to collect information under the Title III rules. So again, it gets confusing, right? Because someone could be a member and they're just coming to dine at Cafe 55 and, it might seem like no big deal, but the information that they're filling out that then goes into Serve Tracker, that information is going to be protected under HIPAA. But when they put their address in for their ActiveNet registration, it's not. So again, confusing, but yes, nutrition is also covered under HIPAA in-home care clients, or if they're funded through either the MyCare funders or traditional Passport, all of those folks, their information is going to be protected under HIPAA. Other questions? Again, I can't really see anybody, so just speak up if you do. Okay, I'm going to move on, but I'm going to also open it I only have a couple of slides left, and then I'll open it for more questions at the end if there are more. So besides having the right for their information to be kept private, clients do have some other rights under the HIPAA rule. They can ask for access to the record that we have on them. They can ask for us to make corrections to that record. They can ask to receive communications in specific ways. So whether that's, I only want you to call me on this cell phone, don't ever call me on my home phone, or I only, don't ever leave a message on this phone. They have the right to all of those things. They can request that we limit what information we do share with outside partners. They can ask for a list of anybody that we have shared their information with. They have a right to a copy of our notice of privacy practices. They can choose someone to act on their behalf, and they can file a complaint if they think any of these rights were violated, and they can file that complaint directly with me, or they can file it with the Department of Health and Human Services, which would be real bad for us if that happened. So outside of, again, protecting our client information, what else do we have to do? We have to maintain a notice of privacy practices that explains how we use their PHI in our general operations. So they know how we intend to use it and why we ask for it. We have to share it initially, and then we have to share it at least every 3 years. So our notice of privacy practices is up on our website as well, which is also one of the 2009 high-tech requirements. And we give those to clients when they enroll as well. We have to enter into what's called business associate agreements with any outside contractor that may access PHI, whether that's an intentional access for something they're doing or unintentional. So the easiest example to explain business associates is another organization who is not a covered entity. And the example I typically use, because it just seems to be the easiest, is when we've had contracts for janitorial services at the Cheshire building. Now, a janitorial company is not going to be bound by HIPAA. They're not collecting or disseminating health information. However, when they're coming into this building and they're cleaning these offices, they could see protected health information sitting out on a desk for somebody. Now, they didn't intentionally look for this item. They just were in that office cleaning. So because of that potential for unintentional access, we have to consider them a business associate, and we have to have them sign a contract basically saying that they will not, do or spread any information that they get while they're, providing whatever they're providing under the contract with us. So we do have quite a few of those that we maintain. We also have to set up what they call administrative, physical, and technical safeguards to basically try to prevent any HIPAA violations from happening. So safeguards are things like what we're doing right now, a training for you guys to understand, what HIPAA is and what our responsibilities are. When we limit access to certain information to only those who need that information to do their job. So for those of you that are in fam care, you probably all know, you all have different access levels. Some of you can see a lot and some of you can see very little. And that's all because of HIPAA. We're limiting the information to only what you actually need in order to do your job. Or another example is all of our computers, there's the screen locks after a certain period of inactivity. That's another, HIPAA safeguard, that if you walk away from your computer and you don't lock it yourself and you leave something up that has client information on it, after a certain period of time, the computer is going to lock out so that no one walking by can see that information. The last thing is you have to identify a security officer and a privacy officer whose job it is to maintain compliance. So I'm the privacy officer, which is why I'm doing this training, and Eli is our security officer. So Eli, can you wave? I don't know. Is your camera even on? Again, can't see anybody. So Eli and I are your two HIPAA folks. If you have questions or things like that, we're the two folks to come and talk to. So in the end, what does that really mean for you, right? I know that's really all you guys care about. So at the end of the day, don't access information that you don't need to have to perform whatever your role is with SourcePoint. Don't talk about client information in open settings where others might be able to overhear you, like the break room or, the gathering room on the other side. Don't send, that doesn't say the right thing. Don't send non-encrypted emails containing client information. Don't identify someone as a SourcePoint client to anybody that you're not sure has a right to know that that person's a SourcePoint client. Don't leave client information unattended and in an unsecure space. And this is a big one post 2020. This includes your home. So if you've been working in a home office, don't leave a bunch of client stuff sitting out where people can see it or have access to it that aren't, that don't have the right to have that information. Make sure you use rigorous passwords, change them when prompted. And then, as I said, ask questions if you're not sure how to handle a specific situation. All of SourcePoint's HIPAA documents are in the agency policies and procedures folder for HIPAA. So you can always check those out if you are interested in some light reading. If not, Eli and I are here. I'm happy to help and talk through any questions you might have. So I'm going to stop screen sharing so I can actually see everybody and then ask if there are any questions.